Welcome to another Catholic Family News special report. I'm Brian McCall, the editor-in-chief of Catholic Family News, and we have a really exciting program for you today. We've had several viewers during some of our weekly news roundups, so we've referred to the political situation in Brazil. Ask us for some more detail. If you're like I am, it's been hard to get some good, accurate information on what actually has been happening there, particularly from a Catholic perspective. And so, in this episode, we're going to explore what has been going on in the presidential elections and what the current state of affairs is. And for this, we are going to bring onto the show someone on the ground in Brazil. And again, I think that's really an excellent opportunity for us here to talk to someone who can be an eyewitness to what's happening. And it is Alex Kawakami, who is a living in Brazil, but who is also a lawyer and a businessman in international business. So he brings to the conversation a lot of experience. He holds a law degree from the Federal University of Minas Gerais State, as well as a master's degree in international law from the Chiba National University in Japan. And he has traveled and worked internationally for international business at his practice, in addition to having a legal background, a legal training. Also, he is a traditional Catholic. So not only is he an eyewitness and an expert, but he can also bring to our conversation that perspective. So we're happy to welcome for the first time Mr. Kamakawi. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm pretty honored to be talking to
Oh.
your viewership and with you.
Oh, thank you. So Brazil, for our viewers may not know too much. It is a large Catholic country. It was found and settled by the Portuguese. So unlike the rest of South America, the Portuguese is the language and the basis of the culture there. It is really the largest country in South America, and as a long and rich Catholic history. Our viewers may be aware it's the country of the other lone traditional bishop in the crisis in the church, Bishop Antonio de Castromayor, yes, who stood up against the radical changes of Vatican II, was a great collaborator of Archbishop Lefebvre, and really kept his diocese for many years free of the novelties in the church until his retirement. And then he also was the co-consecrator at the 1988 consecrations in a cone that brought the four bishops. So really, and was involved speaking out against the attempts of liberalism and communism to make inroads in Brazil. And Brazil for many years was resisted a lot of the liberal influences in South America. But a little background, I'd like to give us that's just sort of a little political overview. But if you could talk to us a little bit about some two apparitions that I know we've discussed before, very important to Brazil and not very well known in the United States. So could you perhaps give us, because they'll give us some important background before we turn to politics.
Absolutely. There is a lot of context uniting what I'm going to briefly go through and the elections this year. But it's good to know from a Catholic perspective. I think there are so many mystical and religious aspects in Brazilian Catholicism that are not very well known. So I hope this is of interest to our viewers. But the first one would be it's not an apparition, but it was the event that led to the consecration of Brazil to having Our Lady as the patron saint of Brazil. The second one, actually. She's not the first one. She's the second one. Not in importance, of course. But this apparition, so to say, is we call it not Our Lady of Aparecida. Aparecida is the name of a small town in the countryside of São Paulo state. And basically the story goes that we had a governor that was appointed by the Portuguese government and came to Brazil to take up his position. and he came to Brazil and was in the small city called Aparecida, and he was a very pious man. And he traveled with an entourage, and one of the people in his entourage was a priest that always celebrated mass every day for him, actually. And another, we were taught in Brazil that he was a very particular man and a very selfish man, actually, and he wanted to eat fish. But the truth is not that. The truth is that he was again a very pious man, and he arrived in Brazil on a Friday, so it was a bit abstinence day, and he wanted to have fish. He couldn't have meat, actually. So they sent the fisherman to a river nearby Aparecida, and they were trying to get some fish and weren't having any success at all. So, but apparently they prayed for Our Lady, and within one of their nets, there came a piece of a statue of Our Lady, actually Our Lady of Conception. There you go. That's the one there. Yes. And actually, you have it with the head there, but apparently they were able to capture this statue without the head. And then they kept on fishing, and then some moments later, they were also able to catch the head with the net. And after that, they had a pretty immense bounty of fish they were able to catch and to send to the governor. So this is the story of Our Lady of Aparecida. This is the statue. Actually, Princess Isabel, who was the last princess in Brazil before it became a republic, she asked for the manufacturing of that mantle over there that you see on the golden picture over there, and the crown. The crown is a replica of the crown that she would receive had she been crowned as Queen of Brazil. And after she, moments before she was deposed by the Republicans, the Brazilian Republicans, she gave this crown to the statue that you see there. On the left side, on the right side there, you see the sanctuary of Our Lady of Aparecida, which is one of the biggest in the world. And so every Brazilian has and particularly every Catholic Brazilian has a pretty strong attachment to Our Lady of Aparecida. And what we'll discuss a little bit further is that this also played an important moment in this year's presidential election.
Yes. And then again, not quite an apparition, but this sort of miraculous discovery of this statue. And then later, I think, as you told me, her head was then discovered and
that's right,
and reattached, followed by a great miraculous, well, appear to be miraculous catch of fish. Is that right?
Yes,
that sort of sanctions or shows the supernatural intervention. But you're right. Hold on to that thought, because when we come to the current president of Brazil, we will learn about that. Now, I had heard of Our Lady of Brazil or Aparecida, but another apparition that you in our preparation told me about is this one.
Cimbres.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a newer apparition. This is from 1936, if I'm not mistaken. And this was, in fact, an apparition. So you see two girls over there, Maria da Luz and Maria da Conceição. They were two girls from the countryside of Brazil. Cimbres is in the state of Pernambuco. It's in the northeastern part of Brazil. It's a very, very poor area. You have a picture there. This has a bit more green, but it's usually a very dry area over there. And in 1936, these two girls started seeing a beautiful woman appearing at the top of the mountain, where you can see there's an image at the top of the blue stairs there they were seeing this lady coming from the trees and stopping there and waving at them. And they started talking to them. And this beautiful lady told them that she was Our Lady. And the story grew. Many people started converging there. And the local bishop ordered a German father to go there and check if this was a true apparition or not. And he went there. He What he would do is the two girls were able to see Our Lady and hear her, but nobody else could. So what he did is he started asking questions to Our Lady in either German or Latin. And of course, the girls would not understand these languages. But Our Lady would reply to them, and they would tell the priest what she was saying. And he would ask some fairly complicated questions, like what was by what name she would like to be called. She would reply that she was Our Lady of Graces or Our Lady of the Grace. He would ask her if she was the mediator of all graces, and she would reply positively yes. So she was giving replies that the girls couldn't understand either the language or the contents of what they're answering. And the priest asked him if she would give any miracle to show that it was Our Lady, and she did. At the top of the blue stairs over there, where you see the image of Our Lady, there was a stream of water that started running. And Our Lady told them that anyone who drank from that water and had faith on her would be cured of illnesses, and so many miracles started appearing. But the important point for this conversation on this apparition is that she left a prophecy or a saying that was widely spread during this year's elections, which was that unless Brazilians started praying and doing penitence, communism would infiltrate Brazil and would bring a lot of tragedy to the country. She also said that the communism would eventually get into the main cities, but not on the countryside of Brazil, and a lot of blood would be shed as a result of that. And this was one of the topics of this election, particularly among Catholics of all colors, not just traditional, but also the many other Catholics that we have here. And what we have seen during this election was a large number of people doing penitence, praying the rosary, and preparing for this election. So this is the background from a Catholic perspective on this year's spiritual fight, so to speak.
And again, I think you said a little bit in the beginning. This is an apparition from almost 100 years ago now, but the church has investigated this and has held it. It is something worthy to be. As with any private apparition, there's no obligation to believe, but has not ruled, as they sometimes do with certain.
The local bishop has approved it in Central Rome.
Yes. So very good. So that then brings us to President Bolsonaro, who was running for re-election this past year. In the United States, a lot of the news media here call him the Trump of the tropics, and they don't usually mean that in a positive comparison.
That's right.
But tell us just a little bit about his appearance on the political scene there in Brazil.
Yes.
What things he did in the country during his first term, both politically and then also I think you'll be able to tie in Our Lady of Aparecida in terms of that. So
that's right. Go ahead. That's right. Bolsonaro was elected firstly, and I don't want to get into too much detail there, but as probably and people who are listening to us, they do know as well, we had President Lula, He was a former president. His successor was President Dilma. She was impeached, and Lula was arrested for some corruption cases connected to Petrobras, which is the Brazilian state oil company.
Yes.
Bolsonaro was elected because he was the politician that was able to cash in the most from this strong opposition to Dilma and to Lula and to the Labour Party overall. He wasn't the only one in the opposition at the time. We had many politicians that were pretty vocal, but he was the one who, if we're going to compare him with Trump, maybe in the most easy to understand language, was pretty against the Labour Party overall. He wasn't a new politician. He was in a House representative for a long time, but was never able to become a senator or to proceed more than that. And he was elected in a clear election with many incidents. As you might know, he was stabbed during the yes. And it's actually a happening that we know who did it. We don't know if he did it by himself or if someone ordered him to do it. We don't have the evidence on that at this point. But anyway, Bolsonaro was elected, and on his administration, it was a pretty unusual administration because, if anything, we had 2 years of COVID during his administration. So it's hard to tell if Brazil would have done better or worse had we not had all the measures that were implemented. Incidentally, all the measures of COVID that were implemented in Brazil during this period were by local governments. Federal government did not have, pretty much like in the US, a say on all the policies. But the fact is that for 2 years, everything that we could live was stay at home, right? Having said that, there are many people that criticize his government, even from a right field perspective, because some people feel that he could have accomplished more. He did a lot. He was able to do the reform of the pension system in Brazil. That brought a lot of fiscal responsibility and stability for the period when the administration was here. He kept the inflation levels at, I wouldn't say low levels, but at acceptable levels for Brazil. I wouldn't say it was low because during, again, COVID, inflation returned to Brazil to relevant points. The exchange with the US dollar also didn't improve, but did not got a lot worse. It got worse for a while, especially when he assumed office. But overall, it was a period of relative stability from an economic perspective. From a political perspective, not so much. He pretty much like Trump. He got a lot of flack from the Congress because he was seen as this independent and sometimes maverick type. He wasn't able to gather the consensus that was necessary to implement more of the policies that a lot of people expected him to. So at the end of the day, he did not have a lot of consensus from both sides of the aisle. I guess Trump is similar in that way as well.
Yes.
And yeah. And for these elections, he came in like he's not the candidate that we wanted, but that's what we have if we want to do some opposition to the left.
Now, very
Uh,
much like Trump again as well, seen as an
exactly.
outsider, and like we've said many times, maybe doesn't get as much done, but is at least kind of a blockade against what the left once
That's
wanted
right.
to do. But and
And
again, I will just say, if our viewers are interested, Tucker Carlson actually did an interview
that's
of
right.
President Bolsonaro several months ago, which goes into that stabbing incident, which, unlike Donald Trump, was not metaphorical. It was actually literal, a literal
That's right.
stabbing,
That's right.
and in some of the policies that he did implement, which
That's right.
were not popular with the left. So there is a little more detail there. But
Yeah.
maybe as a Catholic, also like Trump, he's a little bit of an enigma in terms of his personal life, but then his great sort of public show of respect for the church. So maybe, again, much like Trump did a few times, could you maybe give us a little insight into
Yeah.
kind of that Catholic
Absolutely.
perspective?
Absolutely. From the policy point of view, Bolsonaro was pretty specific when it came to some very important issues for us Catholics. He was blatantly against abortion. He was very strongly against the whole LGBTQ and gender policies side, particularly when it came to education and what should be the curriculum in schools. There
Mm.
was a long fight that he was pretty engaged in, and honestly speaking, I'm not pretty sure that he was very successful there. But of course, better than the alternative for sure. Another important point that we need to raise is he's not your traditional Catholic, but he was pretty sensitive to this request of a large number of Brazilians. It's important to notice that Brazil is the largest Catholic country in the world in terms of population.
Mhm.
And even though not all of are actually practitioners or are actually at church every Sunday, but and then we come back to the story of Nossa Senhora de Aparecida, Our Lady of Aparecida, because prior to the elections, he did two things that were very appealing to Catholics. The first thing is he consecrated the country to Our Lady of Aparecida. Of course, he's not a priest, but as the president of Brazil, he officially consecrated Brazil to Nossa Senhora de Aparecida. And the other
As
thing,
did, if our viewers are familiar, as did Garcia Moreno, the president of Ecuador, did the
that's
same thing.
exactly
So again, that is, although not a priest, certainly the political leader, as the head of the state, has a duty, but also has the great power to consecrate his country. So again, that's certainly very traditional. And we do
exactly.
know what happened to Garcia Moreno after he did that. He was murdered by the Freemasons. But
That's
yes.
there. There you go. And the other important thing that he did is he went to the Aparecida Sanctuary that we saw in the earlier photo there, and he tried to gather a large number of Catholics to pray the Rosary there. And well, I say he tried because the bishop did not allow him to enter the sanctuary. And when people gathered outside to pray the rosary outside, they started playing, they started ringing the bells. And some stores got some speakers and played music for 30 minutes straight. And they were unable to pray the rosary there. So those were two moves that appealed to the Catholic basis quite efficiently, I'd say.
Well, he might not be a traditional Catholic, but he now knows what it feels like to be one, if the bishops do to you.
There
And
you
very
go.
similar, I mentioned, and our viewers may remember a video from John Venari from about 2005, when a traditional pilgrimage was made to Fatima, and the exact same thing happened. They must have a script. They first rang bells, and then they blasted music through a sound system to drown out the rosary. Then they send somebody to steal the microphone. So again, interesting. So what happens to traditional Catholics at least happened to him.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. This is overall Catholics. A lot of them are supporting them, but of course, a part of the Catholic Church and Catholics in Brazil were not as supportive, and
Mhm.
were pretty much on the Labor Party side. It's important to notice, Brian, that the theology of liberation, as we call here in Brazil,
Mm.
is the priests that were connected to that movement were very active in the founding, in the establishment of the Labor's Party. So from the very beginning, they were very supportive to Lula. They knew him very well. And although most of them have left church now, the biggest name is Leonardo Boffi, who's one of the exponents of the theology of liberation. He was a big supporter of Lula, and of course they
Mm.
always are able to gather some of the Catholics there.
Yes. And we've reported on Buffy in prior reports. Our viewers may be familiar with him. Yes.
There you go. Yeah. This was the Catholic perspective on the elections, yes, there was the church was, at least the bishop of Aparecida was not very friendly to that. Later on, we have the National Bishops Conference of Brazil issuing a letter saying that they resented that a lot of people use the Catholic faith for electoral purposes, and that every Catholic should think by themselves who they want to vote for or not, and that the current church would expect that they would choose someone that would be friendly towards workers' rights and the environmental protection and the value of human beings and so on and so forth. We also know that our current Pope is very akin to these issues and talks about them quite frequently.
So the Francis agenda they push.
That's it.
So you should all be free to vote for the communist-leaning person we tell you to vote for. Yes. So then they had an election, and in Brazil, it is like we were talking actually in our recent news roundup, like Georgia, where if you have multiple candidates, which is very typical in Brazil, you have a
Yep.
first round election, and if no one achieves an absolute 51% or
Yep.
over 50% majority, you then move to a runoff. So in that first election with a number of candidates, what was the reported result?
The reported result, well, a bit of background here
Yes.
as well. All of the polls were giving an easy victory to Lula.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having numbers like 8% difference, 10% difference in favor of Lula throughout the whole election cycle. And this is important to notice because since last elections, we had a pretty bad history of bad polling, to the point where most of Brazilians were not they didn't trust any of these reports, and we knew that they were not trustworthy. We shouldn't listen to them. We needed to put a grain of salt there.
Hmm.
This is an important point that I would like to stress, Brian. Probably in America you have the same problem, and I think it's pretty worldwide.
Yes.
But the biggest loss that I feel that we have as a civilization is that we do not have a single trustworthy source of information from legacy media that we can trust.
Mm-hmm.
And during the whole election, we saw that none of the information that we were getting was actually factual or objective. It was pretty tainted with some kind of bias from some side. Legacy media in Brazil is 100% left leaning, with the exception of one channel and this is one point that I'd like to touch upon as well. They during the election cycle, when they started giving news about some issues of some decisions of the electoral court issued some orders gagging them from preventing them from giving any new information regarding some aspects of the election, particularly regarding the what happened, which was we had 40 profiles of conservative journalists and influencers, as you'd call them today, that were taken down from YouTube and all other media by order of the electoral court.
And again, if we just pause there are two other facts about the Brazilian electoral system that I'll share with our viewers. One is, unlike the United States, we did have this difficulty is the Supreme Court is a court that handles all cases and didn't take any electoral cases. Brazil actually has a special court set up, the electoral court, as you referred to supervise and deal with issues related to the election. But interestingly, what they did is they were censoring people, as you mentioned. The second important factor people need to know is that
I didn't say that, Brian.
Sorry, we're gagging. Yeah, I said it. Gagging. But the other thing is that all of the voting in Brazil is electronic. And to make that clear, in the United States, when we talk about electronic, is electronic tabulation. So you fill out a paper ballot, you put it in, and a machine, electronic, counts it. There, it actually, you cast your ballot directly on a device, not on a piece of paper. Then that device tabulates. So there are just two facts about the system as we now dive into, after the first round, both Lula and Bolsonaro emerged, neither with a majority. But then in the second round, Lula was declared as having the majority. But some questions arose as to around the election. So maybe you can take us to some of the concerns that have been raised about the election.
Absolutely. So the voting system, the electronic voting system that we have here, basically it's a box. You have a numeric table in it, and you press the number of the candidate that you want to choose, and the machine registers that. So there is no creation of any paper or physical evidence of who you voted for. Although some of the machines apparently are auditable, and you can actually see how the historical of the voting happened. This new voting system was firstly introduced in 2018 by the Electoral Court. It was heavily criticized by Bolsonaro, criticized it. A lot of members of Congress criticized it. And the armed forces were also very suspicious about it. They ran some tests. Many of the experts on IT that were in charge of doing that saw some possibilities of interference in the voting process. Mainly because, again, I don't want to get into too much detail on that, but the process where you actually punch in the number of the candidate and it register in the machine, the voting machine, is apparently solid. But there are two parts of this process that are not so solid. The first one is, and this is in the report that the Army has, not the Army, but the armed forces have issued on the voting process. We're going to get to that later. But what they said is we don't know what the source the firmware, the source software of the voting machine is like. And we were not given access to it for us to test and see if it has any kind of frailties. And the second point is that in order to transmit this data from the machine to the vote counting center in Brasilia, you need to use the internet. And at this point, in the middle of the way, you don't know what may happen or not.
Yes.
These were the points that were raised back then in 2018 when there was the first attempt to introduce it. And the president of the electoral court, which is necessarily one of the judges in the Supreme Court in Brazil, it was Judge Barroso at the time, he said, listen, it's completely safe. And, if you don't want to believe that it is safe, well, some people believe that the earth is flat, so I can't do anything about it.
Right.
So, nobody was easy with that. Nobody was tranquilized by what happened. This year we had a new Supreme Court judge presiding over the electoral court. He was Judge Moraes. Judge Moraes was his approach was okay. So we have introduced the electronic voting, and we have showed to you guys that it is completely safe. So if you start saying that it isn't safe, what you're actually saying is that you don't believe in our voting system, and this is a threat to democracy.
Sounds familiar. Yes.
There you go. So, and that's why we had so many channels, so many public people, and so many venues that when they started reporting, hey, we're seeing some things that do not seem very normal in the results of the vote counting. He's starting cutting and issuing gag orders on these venues so they would stop doing that.
So maybe can you walk us through some of those anomalies or things that looked unusual? And again, you've sent me some visuals to help us this, but maybe you can walk us through some of the things that seem strange.
Absolutely. So we have here the graph that you see on the left is for the first round, and the one on the right is for the second round. And both of them have as sources the electoral court data. And the first thing that looked weird is that you can see that the lines there are pretty smooth, and you don't have a lot of variation on them. Well, just so you have a perspective, the southern part of Brazil largely supported Bolsonaro. The northern part of Brazil largely supported Lula. The middle part of Brazil, again, Bolsonaro supporters. So what you would expect to see here is that the pattern of the curves there, they would change a lot, either because you had different boxes with different votes, or because you have one region of the country counting the votes after the other. But you see that the two curves are somewhat similar, and they're very smooth. Now, this question was raised. A lot of mathematicians brought this up. Other mathematicians said that this is not so weird because as time goes on, the number of votes for one candidate and for the other are so consolidated by then that as you add the small number of votes from many different voting machines, the curve doesn't change that much. But even so, in the beginning, this graph should be more looking more like a seesaw or reflecting the different kinds of votes that we'll have in different portions of the country, in different portions of cities, and so on. And it doesn't. So this is not an evidence that some tampering happened, but it brought a lot of questions to people who were watching this whole process.
Right.
Then what we see here is an analysis, another important point is here, Brian. We must remember that the electoral court was very proactive towards shutting down any questioning of what was happening with the voting machines. And actually, the federal police was instigated at points by the court without a provocation from the DA's office to investigate people who were giving this information. So a lot of this information does not have a source, and it's one of the big problems with this information. But they wouldn't be able to be publicized otherwise. But what you see here is that one of the analysis shows that the difference in timing of the counting of the votes, and you can see that in the beginning, only 8.8% of votes were counted between in the period from 5 o'clock p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Yes.
And then you have a very fast counting of 82.6% of the voting counted within the next 2 hours. And then the remaining 8.6% being counted in the remaining 6 hours. Now, the only reason why you'd have to for this delay in time would be internet problems, or maybe we see this in Arizona right now. Elderly people who take more time to vote, and then they take more time to have access to the voting boxes in the end. But the fact is that according to this analysis, and there's no way to show if this is correct or not, a large portion of these votes were for Lula and not for Bolsonaro.
In this period of rapid counting, yes.
No, okay. In this period of the remaining 6 hours, where 8.6% of the votes.
Got it. Okay.
Were
yes.
Counted.
Okay. So, interesting.
Yeah. So you see here, this is you can see on the axis here. Sorry, this is in Portuguese. But on the vertical axis, you have the time up to the end of counting. And on the horizontal axis, you have the percentage of votes for Lula. And you can see that it grows
over time.
Rightward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
It's just on a straight slope up, growing all the time. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So again, is that an evidence of tampering? No. But again, it brought a lot of suspicion to Brazilians overall. Finally, you had a third analysis that was made. Again, we don't know this group. We only know that it's an Argentinian mathematician that he made a live in YouTube to show his analysis. It was shown from Argentina. It couldn't be shown in Brazil. And what you see there is you see the photographs there.
Yes.
They show the dispersion of the number of votes per voting machine according to the type of machine. So basically, there are two types of machines. One which was made in 2020, and the other ones that were made before that. And as you can see on the left side of the page, you have a distribution of points which is pretty uniform. It gives a very narrow margin of advantage for Lula, which is 46 against 44.6. On the right side of the page, you have the same gathering of the votes in the voting machines, where the machines were the older type. And there you have an 8% difference in favor of Lula. And the problem with this is you can see that in a lot of the machines on the right side, you have 100% of the votes for Lula and 0% of votes to Bolsonaro.
And again, just doesn't prove anything. But if you have, it's kind of like basically saying we're going to flip a coin 1,000 times and it always comes up. Or put another context, you have a voting machine in an area, not a single person who voted at that machine voted for the other candidate. Seems
That's right.
extraordinary. Yes,
That's
yes,
right. Exactly.
yes.
And the only common thread that you have that would justify this pattern of voting, the only outlier is the machine type.
Yes.
It's interesting that this analysis was made using the data from the electoral court that was
Mhm.
published. Some groups that I know here in Brazil have tested have peer reviewed this study, and they reached similar results, if not the same results. But the interesting thing is that the moment that he finished presenting his live, the Argentinian mathematician finished his live, the electoral court website went offline. And when it returned, the data that was there was no longer showing the type of machines in each voting machine. So probably it was, I don't know, some technical problem, or we will
Yes.
never know.
But one of the things you have indicated is the differences between these machines is one is possibly able to be audited or appears as you can
That's
audit
right.
to trace it when the votes came in or how, and the other is a complete black box. You just have a
That's right.
total. Yes. And
Exactly.
it's the ones that are the black box, you just get a
The
total
older types.
that you
Yes.
have extraordinarily high levels. And again, you would expect, as in this country, certain areas of the country are more favorable to one candidate, there'd be a
Sure.
higher percentage of
Yes.
vote. But it'd be the
Mhm.
equivalent, just for our viewers, if in Detroit, Joe Biden got 100% of the vote and Donald Trump zero.
And nobody
Uh,
voted for him. Yes.
I mean, again, you might expect a large number of votes for one candidate, but to have a
That's
hundred
right.
zero is something that seems highly
That's right.
statistically not likely. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
Uh, uh,
So
uh,
this, okay,
no, no. The
yeah,
the big, and then I get into the Ministry of Defense analysis of
yes.
the voting process. And the Ministry of Defense has issued a report of their analysis of the elections yesterday. And their conclusion was that they could not rule out that there was a problem. They could not also state that there was a problem.
Hmm.
But they saw some anomalies in that regarding which they would like to have a commission formed with experts and with people from the electoral court in order to analyze whether any of these frailties or any of these anomalies or any of these points are relevant to the election process or not. You would ask me, why does the Ministry of Defense has to do that?
Hmm.
And yeah, so it's not their role to do that. But firstly, because in these elections, the armed forces were really concerned, and they ended up, I might say, unfortunately, becoming the moderating power in Brazil.
Hmm.
Because we had all these issues from the Supreme Court in Brazil and the Electoral Court. So people overall feel a bit uneasy about the decisions that they have issued during this process. And legislation, the Congress again it has shown throughout the Bolsonaro administration that sometimes they're not free enough to do whatever they're entitled and asked to do. So people end up looking at the armed forces, and this is unfortunate. This is very unfortunate. But the armed forces on its side, and this must be said, they at any point they haven't said we're going to intervene. There's going to be a coup d'état.
Hmm.
Nothing of that has also happened. So some people are unhappy with this report because it doesn't state, okay, there was a fraud, but it's not the role of the armed forces to say, well, it was a fraud. They can only analyze this technically and see if they see some kind of weak point, Achilles heel, from a security perspective.
Yes. And again, their conclusion is we can't prove there was tampering because we can't get to the evidence.
Yes.
We can't audit, as you said, the firmware. And so we can't prove there is, but we see evidence that there's anomaly.
Yes.
There's things that can't be proven one way or the other, but raise questions.
The reason why they're saying this, Brian, is they weren't, if you're going to do an audit on a software, you need to have the software in a controlled environment so you can test whether you can hack it or not.
Yes.
They weren't given that by the electoral court. They were giving records of the code lines. And a piece of paper and a pen, and said, okay, so go ahead. The code in the voting machines have 17 million lines. To give you an idea, some video games have 40 million code lines.
Okay.
So it's pretty much, you have to look at that, read point by point, and imagine in your mind, what that specific command is going to do, instead of having it in a control environment and testing what it does.
Yes.
And see what this. So based on this fact, the armed forces said, listen, you did not give us the information we need to test it. But again, we know that during the transmission of the data through the internet, you have the possibility of tampering there. You have the possibility of tampering in the source code. And we need more information to look into if we were going to say anything. The electoral court took that report and said that we appreciate that the Ministry of Defense has approved the election process.
Well, now, and again, in Brazil, people have seen this and have become concerned about the integrity of the election. And we have a couple clips that you sent to me. And then there were some in the 2020 election here, some gatherings, but the scale of concern in these. Now, these protests primarily or these gatherings were organized before what happened yesterday. And one of their reasons was they were asking to see this report because the Ministry of Defense had prepared the report, but it was not made public. But I just want to just show a little loud. Let me turn that down a little bit. A little bit of this, just so you can get a sense of people who came to these manifestations because of a concern over that. I mean, these are. This is in São Paulo, or where is this?
That's right. That's in São Paulo. Yes.
So really, as you can just see, the size of the crowds there and the noise from the volume is really anything larger than we've seen in the United States. Here's one other.
Novembro de 2002, galera, Belo Horizonte, Raja Gazaga.
And I'm not sure where this one is also São Paulo, or is this somewhere else?
This is in Belo Horizonte.
But okay, so a different part of the country. You see really just an extraordinary number of people, lots of Brazilian flags there.
Yes.
And were these relatively peaceful protests? What was your
overall? Yes.
Yes.
If you imagine that in every major city in Brazil, we had protests this size. Not just for a day. We had at least 3 days of continuous protesting with this amount of people. We don't have a head count. We know it was really big. So overall, we didn't have. There was no violence. There were no major cases that we've heard of. What we heard of is, first of all, there was the truckers.
The truckers, they seem to be everywhere, the truckers.
There you go, yeah.
Yes.
Well, they are the most sensitive when it comes to the economy, right?
Yes.
So they have blocked some of the roads. And when President Bolsonaro, the only statement that he has done so far in public was to ask the truckers to stop the blockages in the roads. Incidentally, it was in after that statement that the secretary came in and said that they were ready to do the transition whenever they were ordered to do so.
The transition to Lula. Oh, yes.
To Lula, yes.
Yes.
And this is what most of the legacy media came and said. Okay, so he conceded. And the wording was pretty thought out over there, I think.
Yes.
But this was the larger incident. For a brief period of time, we had a concern that we would have a repeat of 2018 when we had a big trucker strike, and we had a lot of scarcity of food and mainly fuel in the cities. We thought it would be something similar. At the end, with Bolsonaro's intervention, they have unblocked the roads. In some cases, a lot of people also tried to block the roads, and we had some cars running over them. It wasn't a pretty sight, but overall, it was pretty peaceful.
So he comes out, he says, stop blocking the roads, but doesn't say anything about the election or conceding. And then his secretary, again, interesting wording, we are prepared to have a transition if ordered, or when ordered to.
When ordered, yes.
Yes, ordered by whom, I guess, is the begs the question there. So what do people think is going to happen next? What Bolsonaro is still occupying, is still in the presidential office, I assume. What is the expectation for what may come next?
Anything from here on is deep within the territory of speculation. And we don't have any good news source on that brand. If you see the corporate media, there's nothing else to happen. The decision has been decided.
Yes.
Lula is already working on the transition. He has already set up his transition team. He already sent some names for the many ministries. He already said that he's going to create 14 new ministries. He already said that, listen, we don't need so much. We don't need to be so tight when it comes to fiscal policies. The important thing, right? We think it was one saying that got really popular during COVID, which was, we'll think about the economy later. What we need to do now is inject liquidity in the market. Again, everything mirrors the American economy quite.
I guess, and not knowing what will happen next, let's bring us back to maybe where we started. So what are some Catholics saying or maybe questioning related to the message from Our Lady apparition in Cimbres that you told us about there? How might people be seeing these current events in light of that?
Yes, we have many Catholics saying that, okay, we didn't pray enough and we didn't do enough penitence. So that's why this is happening. Another conclusion from that would be, well, she told us that communism would enter the capitals. So there it is. It's in the capital. So we need to perhaps move to the countryside or something like that. Yeah, it's overall it was a cold shower. Yes, for Catholics overall, particularly because the second round election was held in Christ the King's Day. So yes. So what happened was that we went in procession and we went to vote right after that. So it was a cold shower.
Well, again, interesting if we just put that for our viewers. So a president, again, is like Donald Trump, not a traditional Catholic by any means, but who consecrates his country, who visits the shrine of Our Lady of Aparecida. He is then up for re-election in the second round vote on the Feast of Christ the King. It's very interesting, right? And again, God, history is not an accident, and we know there are many things that happen in history at times and on dates that God chooses. Again, a lot of this, as we said, and this is where I think we differ from the mainstream or the legacy media. when we see questions or things like that, we ask and want to look at them and look at them. We don't just want to say, "Oh, forget about it. Don't look behind the curtain. Don't just
That's right.
trust us." And that, I think, is very similar experience in our countries that Catholics have felt. Well, great. We really just have a slight amount of time left. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of and maybe end our discussion with for our viewers today?
Yes. Well, again, I think it's very important for us as Catholics, Brian, to understand that. Of course, God has a plan, and we must be really careful not to confuse a person who is running for president and what our Lord wants from us, and what Our Lady wants from us. We know what Our Lady and our Lord want from us, and they want the best for us. They love us, and whatever is happening is for our for the greater glory and for what's happening. So what I felt during this whole process is that a portion of the concerns of the electoral court are correct, in the sense that we did have a lot of fake information, bad information, made up information running around and making people anxious, making people excited sometimes, but sometimes making them sad. And I think that it is at these times that, as good Catholics, we must have some Saint Ignatius by our side, having good judgment, looking at reality, trusting our Catholic network of people to have us to provide to us good information, good analysis, and to keep our heads cool. This is going to happen again and again. I'm looking at the process there in the U.S. right now, in the Arizona polling, and how difficult that is. You were expecting a red wave that didn't come, and I don't know to what extent it's something similar that we're going through here in Brazil. We need to keep cooler heads at the moment. Again, have good judgment, have some Catholic prudence in the judgment of what's happening, and rebuild the Western civilization that was brought upon by the Catholic Church in all its wealth of looking at reality as it is, and within rules of God that will never change. So that's if I could leave any messages, is this: let cooler heads prevail within prudence and within our faith.
Very true, right? God wants us to have both those perspectives. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. So we can't just bury our head in the sand and say we don't care about all of this. We need to be aware of the times we live in, but not put all our faith in it. We know, without me, you can do nothing. And in the end, her Immaculate Heart will triumph. We don't know when that end will come, but we do know that Sister Lucia told us communism would spread throughout the world.
That's right.
And we will have to go through that. And what we can do is be aware, do what we can in prudence, but then follow the 5 first Saturdays, pray our rosary, use our brown scapular, give the spiritual aids our Lady's given us. So wonderful.
And keeping in mind, Brian, that we are very, we're very blessed, because if Our Lady trusted on us to be living these times, we must have some value.
Very true. Very good point. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kawakami, for coming to visit, spend some time with Catholic Family News, and give us some really good firsthand information. So thank you. Maybe if we have some more developments there, we can have you come back and update us. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. If you've enjoyed this program, please subscribe to our Rumble YouTube channels, our audio podcasts, and particularly, as we talked about with some of the sensitivities with big tech, do keep on our Rumble channel in case this video may be difficult to find otherwise. As well, please consider a subscription to Catholic Family News, our monthly paper, which supports all of our apostolates. So with that, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.